Penguin Random House Audio presents West of Eden, An American Place by Gene Stein. Read for you by Scott Brick, Paul Bamer, Tara Sands, Cassandra Campbell, Arthur Morey, Mark Bramhall, Kathleen McInerney, Anne-Marie Lee, Fred Sanders, Georgina Marie, Keith Zarabica, Will Damron, and Bruce Mann.
Prologue. Welcome to Los Angeles.
Mike Davis. When I was a younger man, I made an arrangement with Gray Line Tours that would allow me to drive in the evenings and on weekends. It was called Working the Extra Board. Their business included tours of Marineland of the Pacific, Forest Lawn Cemetery, Hollywood Park, and Universal Studios, as well as shuttling conventioneers around downtown. Most of the time, however, I was punching the clock on the hugely popular tour of Hollywood and Beverly Hills. We dressed up like airline pilots from a Mel Brooks comedy. Oddly, the company did not provide any information for the tours. There was a fixed route, of course, but otherwise, new drivers were expected to purchase celebrity addresses and the tour wrap from older drivers. But I was a tightwad, so I just winged it. I'd pick out a big house and lie about who lived there. Usually this was no problem, but now and then a veteran fan caught me. I remember one time exuding, "Here she is! I love Lucy. There's her house. We'll slow down so you can take photos." Then some lady in the back absolutely freaks out. I've been on this tour enough times to know that's not Lucille Ball's house. She lives 3 blocks away. Beverly Hills was no big deal, but driving the tourists from Iowa down Hollywood Boulevard was the most hallucinatory part of the job. This was Hollywood in the early 70s, post-Flower Power, post-Manson. The sidewalks teemed with runaway kids, teenage prostitutes, male and female, people raving, heroin addicts with 2 weeks to live, the absolute epicenter of human misery. It was an awful place, especially on the Hollywood at Night tour. I used to pull up around the corner from Grauman's Chinese and kick the tourists out to go venerate the footprints. I'd lock myself in the bus. I'd close the windows, saying to myself, "Okay, zombies, you can't get me. Go eat the tourists." The weird part is that the tourists would get out and, surrounded by misery, gasp, "Ava Gardner's footprints!" I mean, there would be someone lying naked or ODing, foaming at the mouth, and they'd walk over the body and say, "Oh, Victor McLaughlin, I remember him." They were ecstatic, and I was mortified. Instead of being distressed by the huge moral discrepancy between the myth of Hollywood and its current reality, most of them only saw what already had been fixed in their minds. It was absolutely eerie and sent me right back to the day of the locust. The point that Nathaniel West made, of course, is that the masses ultimately want to kill and devour, to cannibalize their celebrity gods. Fortunately, there were some dramatic exceptions. The Longshoremen's Union used to bring tours of Japanese-American, Filipino-American sugarcane workers from Hawaii. I'd always get those tours. They were wonderful people, and they liked to hear stories and jokes. They were interested in history, including the tidbits of radical history. Then there were the guys I truly despised. The 40-something drunk white conventioneers with their libidos hanging out of their pants. These leering, hypocritical bastards automatically assumed that every Gray Line driver was a pimp. Unfortunately, several were, who could set them up with a 15-year-old girl. It was all the more disgusting since you knew that most of these Babbitts were upstanding family men and Kiwanis members from some middle-sized city in the Midwest. Gray Line had 2 kinds of buses. The normal tour bus was a second-hand American Eagle retired from Greyhound. But for shuttling conventioneers and the like, we used ancient municipal transit buses without a luggage compartment, what we called flat bottoms. We take sometimes 6, 7, 8 buses up to Universal Studios. Universal was fun because we didn't have to do anything. We just dropped the tourists off in the parking lot. The drivers would hang out together in one bus, sometimes passing a bottle back and forth. Half of them were pimping girls or selling shit out of the back of the buses. So one day we're sitting in my bus, and we see one of these buses slowly rolling by and picking up speed. Now buses, like heavy-duty trucks, have a maxi brake, looks like a big red button, that welds your wheels in place when you park. I guess the driver didn't realize that the huge Universal parking lot has a very slight slope. So his bus started rolling backwards, very slowly at first, then gaining speed. "Open the door, Mike!" the driver shouted. I opened the door, let them out, and we all ran after the bus. But it was too late. We watched in a kind of fascinated horror as that old flat bottom just kept rolling down and then off the embankment onto the Hollywood freeway.
Chapter 1. The Dohenis. 905 Loma Vista Drive, Beverly Hills.
A winding driveway dropped down between retaining walls to the open iron gates. Beyond the fence, the hill sloped for several miles. On this lower level, faint and far off, I could just barely see some of the old wooden derricks of the oil field from which the Sternwoods had made their money. A little of it was still producing in groups of wells, pumping 5 or 6 barrels a day. The Sternwoods, having moved up the hill, could no longer smell the stale sump water or the oil, but they could still look out of their front windows and see what had made them rich. If they wanted to. I didn't suppose they would want to. Raymond Chandler, The Big Sleep.
Richard Rayner. The nature of scandals is that once Pandora's box has been opened, it always ends up murkier, more intestinal, more twisted, and much bigger and longer than anyone could have imagined before they opened the box. And the story of Edward L. Doheny is centered around a Pandora's box that unleashed an extraordinary sequence of events, enthralling the nation for a decade. It involved the fall and death of a president. It involved millions and millions of dollars paid to some of the most gifted lawyers in the country. It involved 2 slayings intimately connected to Doheny in circumstances that are still very murky. And it ended in the fall from grace for Doheny, at one point the richest man in America, who died in 1935, broken and disgraced, very much by his own actions and his determination to protect himself.
Patrick Ned Doheny. My great-grandfather was shocked at the way that everything spun out. When you think about a guy that strong being broken, you have to wonder what it must have been like to have had to deal with all those elements, and who you had to be in order to survive it. It was a tragedy, but the history books have always done a hatchet job on him. It's the heartlessness that I find the most bitter about the interpretation of our family. And it upsets me that someone like my great-grandfather, who was such a seminal figure, gets supplanted by a cardboard stick figure. That's madness. What my great-grandfather did is almost beyond conception in terms of the amount of money that he made, the success that he enjoyed, and the wildness of his adventure. That whole business with There Will Be Blood, however, was completely apocryphal. There's not a shred of truth in it. The only true part of the film was at the beginning, with him in the mine shaft by himself. He always did say that he once fell down a mine shaft and broke his legs, but all the rest of it is utter horseshit. All these people, Upton Sinclair with oil and later the movie people, had a vested interest in furthering their own agendas, and it's ludicrous to confuse those agendas with history. I enjoyed the movie, and I thought Daniel Day-Lewis was outrageously good, but it had nothing to do with my people at all. The actual story itself is so much more interesting than anything they might have come up with. Shuffle.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?